We are so enthusiastic at Prison Professors every time we have an opportunity to introduce a person who's built a successful career, because every one of those people leaves us the clues that anybody can use to build more success in their life. This is certainly what would have inspired me when I was going through 26 years in prison. I always wanted to listen and learn from people that achieved high levels of success. And what I find from them, they all follow that same principled path that we teach in our courses. What is it? You got to define success. 2, you've got to document a strategy. 3, you've got to create your own tools, tactics, and resources, putting priorities in place. 4, you've got to hold yourself accountable. And 5, you got to just execute the strategy every single day. Mike, I am so glad that you decided to join our group. This is Mike Raub, a successful businessman and business professional who's got an amazing story of commitment and discipline. And he's going to be able to tell us today about how that influenced his career. Mike, thanks so much for being with us on a Saturday morning.
Well, Michael, thanks for having me. I do think it's great to learn from others and you never stop learning, but it's also a pleasure to be able to give back in any way, shape, or form that I can.
So tell us about giving back. Tell us about how that mindset began, because I know that you and I have spoken about the career that you've built and the way that you've not only learned from your family, from your parents, but also how you've used that same principle to rear your children. Why don't you give us some background about where you grew up and who your mentors were?
Well, I grew up, I kind of split my life growing up in Ohio in the Midwest and then moving down to Florida. But I do think there's something, anyone who has a tie to the Midwest kind of has a feeling about what that is to be brought up in a community where I think people are always very friendly and giving. And there is a level of care for one another. So I was brought up with great parents who really always were there for me and there for others, and very involved in the community. When we lived in Ohio and then subsequently moved to Florida, always about how we can get involved, they could get involved and make a difference in other people's lives and not just within their own family. And that is something that I think that giving shouldn't be hard. It's something that over time there's a personal value in that. And if you're enriching the life of anyone else in even a small form, then I think, it's something where, I've certainly learned the gratitude, the feeling that I get from even making a minor difference in somebody's life. And it benefits me every day just from doing that.
So your mom, as I recall you telling me, she had a big role in working with the criminal justice system as a volunteer, and somebody just wanted to make people's lives better. Could you give us a little background about what she did?
Well, yeah, actually, both my parents got involved in a group called the Space Coast Marine Institute for high-risk youth in Florida, who sort of this is the last chance before being fully permanently put into a system or for a long term. That organization really fostered leadership, growth, and giving great role models. The people who continue to run that organization are some of the greatest people you can ever meet, and they're dedicated to finding the best in people where other people already had given up. And the success rate of that organization is off the charts because these people finding you can find something great in everybody. And I think that organization strives to find that and add structure to lives of people, kids who didn't really have, for one reason or another, didn't have that structure in their home life or made some really bad choices at a young age. And instead of throwing away the rest of their life, let's figure out how to build it. So my parents got actively involved in that organization, I think 20 plus years ago, and to this day continue to be actively involved. And I know that the updates they get every year or probably every quarter, I mean, they're heavily involved and supported it both financially, but mostly with their time and their commitment. It's one of the things that my parents talk about constantly, just having been able to make a difference, even in a small way, in the lives of some of these people who've gone on to have really successful lives. And, everyone defines success differently, but these people have gone on to be great members of the community, great jobs, raised wonderful families. And it's like these lives could have been thrown away otherwise. And I think, they recognize that everybody deserves a chance to find their own success.
Well, that's why we're so grateful to you, Mike, because we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to help people who are at the start of a prison sentence, the start of a jail sentence, understand this isn't how they have to end their life. They can always start sowing seeds to become something better. And it all really starts with defining success and visualizing what's the best possible outcome from where I am. And I know when I listened to you during our pre-interview, our pre-talk, that's kind of how you started as a young man, really as young as in childhood. You kind of had a visual of what you wanted to become. Help our audience understand what that vision was for you when you were starting out your academic and athletic journey.
Yeah, and I'll get to go to the end very briefly. In that the path that I thought I was on changes 100 times over, and that's totally okay. As I think that for me, it's always like what's the next goal, and the path may change along the way, but still need something. To me, it's always been focusing on what I'm trying to achieve, and if something leads me down a different path, that's okay as well. But from a young age, I was very academically driven. And also played a lot of sports. I really had a desire to do two things before I got to my professional career. One was I wanted to go to one of a top tier college, and two, I wanted to play collegiate sports in one form or another. And I think I felt those passions equally. As a matter of fact, I knew one would drive my career, but one was what made me get up out of bed in the morning and be really happy was playing sports. So I played a lot of sports, but football was the one where I felt like that was the one where I had continued success. And not to say that I was changing the world and raising headlines and had any NFL prospects, anything crazy like that. But I was one of the hardest workers on the team, and always a starter, always playing hard and grinding it out. And I was fortunate that I was able to go to a school where I was able to continue playing. But from the academic side, I got very business oriented. My father, having been a chief financial officer of a company, finance always was of interest to me. So I think because of my respect that I had for my dad, and my math was a strong suit for me, that path always seemed to be of interest to me. And I targeted a couple of schools, and I'm fortunate for a lot of reasons, but the Wharton School of Business is a well-known business school for its master's program, but the undergraduate program there is one of the best undergraduate business out there. And I was fortunate to be able to attend Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, and then get to play football while I was at school as well. So continued passions, and so many people I got to know from the experience really then sort of propelled the next phases of my life. But it was a lot of work and dedication getting there. And I was driven there was no way I would get to that school without putting in all the hard work every day. I think that started with me from birth, but really junior high school and high school was all about study. If I needed to work this hard to get an A, then I would work this hard. And I think it was always like work harder than you thought you needed to make sure you got the results you were looking for.
What position did you play?
Strong safety. So, yeah.
And that you played from, Pee-wee football all the way through your time at the University of Pennsylvania?
Right. Well, I switched. Yeah. Over the years, I think I played different positions. I played defensive end, which is crazy. If you can't see how my size you know me, Michael, but you can't see my size a little bit, but I'm a 5'11", 185 pound guy. It's not exactly defensive end material in high school, though, the way we played that. So it was kind of like I was a cornerback, and all of a sudden I'm playing a speed rush defense. So if you know anything about football, it's crazy, but my coach said, this is where we're moving you to and why, and this is why it makes sense. And I just said, okay. But he always told me my natural position was strong safety. We already had one of my friends was playing that. So in college, I switched back to what was the position I probably should have always played in. And so it was a hard transition, but.
So if I were in prison listening to this story, I would have been inspired by a guy like Mike. And that's why I asked him to join our program. What I just listened and learned from him during his first 10 or 15 minutes that he's spoken with us is this message of knowing what he wanted to do. Sure, he had great mentors and role models in his parents, likely in his coaches as well. But what he saw is he said, I want to become a leader, and I need to kind of start out by being the CEO of my own life. And you can do that at any time just by defining success and then setting those really clear goals that are going to help you advance. He knew he wanted to get into a great university, and he knew that he wanted to play sports while he was doing that. So he said, if I knew I had to put this much effort in, I would put this much effort in. The question for you is, how can you use that same principle, that same strategy in your life so that you can have this, build this pattern of increasing levels of success? And we just heard that he succeeded in getting into the Wharton School. Do you know the acceptance rate of every 100 people that try to get into Wharton? How many make it?
Well, at University of Pennsylvania this year was 5% of applicants or less got in, but Wharton has probably about a 2% acceptance rate now. It was better when I was going. It was a little easier then, but
yeah, I mean, look at that.
Very lucky.
It's out of 100 people that try to get into this school to get in. That means 98 people can really work hard, but they don't. Yeah. Well, you've got to use those statistics in your own life. How many people who are sitting in jail or prison have just the inverse? 70% of them are going to have continuing problems when they get out of jail. They won't be able to find a job. They won't find housing. They won't be able to get traction in their life. And that's why we really believe it's so important to start sowing seeds today. And as somebody who was in prison for 26 years, I feel deeply committed to profiling leaders like Mike, the kind of person that I would have liked to have learned from at the start. Mike, maybe you could help us continue the understanding of how your career evolved. So you went through Wharton. Tell us about the level of commitment you had to give there to earn a degree, and how that degree helped to shape the career you built after graduating.
Yeah, I think it's, and there's some noticeable stumbling blocks along the way too, and I think that's also a part of the journey.
Let's hear them.
In college, yeah, I mean, college. I mean, I thought I went from being the top student in my high school, grade wise. I mean, there might have been a couple of people I can name that would be, I think, were smarter than me, but I outworked everybody was my goal. And so I thought I got to college, didn't care what school it was, and feel the same way. And all of a sudden I realized that everybody around me was one of the smartest, hardest working people I've ever encountered. So it changed. It took me a minute to realize, wow, there's a lot of really hardworking, driven people out there. And so now it's like, I don't know how much harder I can work. So I have to start working smarter. And so it took me a while to adapt to what I needed to do, how I study differently, how I work differently, who I studied with, to start getting the best out of my experience, doing the best I could in my coursework. It was very competitive. Thankfully, I'm a competitive by nature person, but it was an adaptation. It was actually a reality check. For the first time, I was like, oh, you know what? I feel sometimes you feel pretty good about yourself, and then I get knocked down a couple pegs and realize, all right, I'm not that special. I got to work my butt off here, and I'm going to keep grinding and throw in a football commitment, add 20 plus hours a week of that. And how do you manage your time? And I think that was one of the biggest lessons I learned right away is, make the most out of the time that you have and focus. Don't try to do 20 things at once. If you're working at your job, just work at your job. If you're studying for a given course, then just focus on that and break things up into chunks. I was very focused on, from Wharton, I wanted to go into the finance field. Investment banking was what my interest was. I realized it would propel me into a lot of other opportunities beyond. So I set my course on that, took a lot of all the finance courses, but really focused on things I thought would build my career or set me up for those jobs. So Wharton being the school it was, tremendous interest from firms to come and interview for people to get jobs. But I think, I don't know where I learned humility, I guess from probably from my parents as well. But as much as I enjoyed when I had a successful interview that led to a follow-on interview, I also decided that every time I got a rejection from a letter from a different job, I posted them on my wall. So I did end up getting 3 job offers out of college, but I had 24 rejection letters hanging on my wall. So, it's kind of like it doesn't matter how good you are. You're not the perfect fit for somebody else, and that's okay. And kind of take that little chip on your shoulder, feeling like, you got something, you hear all those people in the NFL draft where they got drafted 2 rounds later and they're like, got to make everybody else pay. Tom Brady always talked about that. And I think it's, one of those things that propels you. And I think, you know what? Those people all said no to me, but these people said yes. And so you take your blessings and appreciate those people that said yes to you. And you look at the people who said no to you and go, I'm going to prove you wrong. Not with angst or anger, but I'm just going to prove you wrong. And sometimes you're the perfect candidate, but you're not the right personality fit. And so you have to accept that as well.
And what we hear as Mike tells his story is he really is just articulating every one of the 10 lessons that's part of our regular course. You start by defining success. You set clear goals. You've got to make that commitment to help you advance from one level to the next. You've got to see yourself. I mean, he saw himself as an investment banker, and every decision he made is consistent with that path. He had to take action. He had to hold himself accountable and saying, I'm just going to work harder. I recognize that the world's not always going to accept me, but I'm going to work harder. He was authentic. He kept his head in the game. He shows you can hear his humility, regardless of how successful he's become. And you will hear through this interview how successful he's become. He can look back and say how all of those early decisions influenced better opportunities. And you've got to be thinking about that yourself. Even if you're sitting in a jail or a prison now, it's crucial that you think about these lessons that we hear from leaders like Michael, and also begin asking questions. What can I do myself? Mike, one of the lessons that we really teach in our course, and I want you to comment on it, is that there are really a couple of very basic principles that anybody can work on, and that's developing strong communication skills, developing strong math skills, and developing strong critical thinking skills. How do those 3 principles influence your journey, not only in getting through one of the most competitive universities in the world, but then going on to build a successful career in business? Critical thinking, communication, and math.
Yeah, and I think math, I think, can be a challenge for anybody. So I'll start with that one. For some people, I'm fortunate math comes easily to me. And I was great at calculus. I don't even understand what that was for, but, basic algebra or basic math, if you can multiply, divide, add, and subtract all day long, I think those things impact your life but I think there's a logic to it, and there's a thoughtfulness to it. And it's, to me, being able to understand some basic principles, no matter what you're doing, whatever job you have, it in some fashion encompasses a business. And ultimately, there's dollars and cents, there's value for your time worked, there's actual exchange of goods and services depending on it. So understanding the basics of math is important and a building block to how you think about things and how you start to value your time as you have success of, if I can make $20 an hour doing this, and but I can only do it 2 hours a week, versus I can make 15 hours a week doing this, but I can do it 20 hours a week. Well, basic math is I make more doing the one job, but I barely get to do it, but I can make a lot more doing the other. Or can I do both? And how do I start? My time is finite. So there's a math element to that. So I think you really start thinking about how you start to value your time. I mean, sometimes it's like, I'll do anything because I have the capacity for it, and I just need to get going. And I think that's part of this broader conversation as well. But at some point, you get the ability to start making decisions on that and making some informed decisions. And you don't have to go to Wharton, and you don't have to have a college degree to, make some basic decisions that are really critical, and they're based on math. So leading into critical thinking, I also think that how people define critical thinking That sounds, I think that can sound like a really high level thought.
Yeah. Before you get to critical thinking, I want to give a takeaway on that math and what you just described, because there's a lot of people that are watching our courses that they're focusing on just getting a credential like a GED, which is great, but a GED is a start. What I just heard from Mike is that if I can learn arithmetic, subtraction, addition, division, multiplication, that's a building block. He also said he became very good in calculus. And before you can even think about getting into calculus, you need those four. Then they can lead you to algebra. The algebra can lead you to differential equations, to geometry, to all different types of things. And what you have to be thinking is, hey, maybe you're never going to be an investment banker, but here's preliminarily how that applies to your life. You can get a GED, but if you don't know how to master every one of those math problems, you haven't reached your full potential. If you want to come out and be a painter, how will math apply? Imagine you could pick up a paintbrush and paint that wall, or you could tell your employer, I'm capable of looking at a job blueprint and figure out how many gallons of paint you need to paint a shopping center. Now you're way more valuable just because you learned math. Make sure that you listen to Mike's story and see how an investment in advancing your math beyond the GED is going to advance possibilities for you. That's a real life example of critical thinking skills and employing yourself. And now I'm going to let you continue with your lesson on critical thinking skills and communication skills.
Oh, but that was a great point there on the paint. I think that's like a perfect. And that's absolutely amazing. And I think
I'd love for people to be able to do what you do, which is raise tens of millions of dollars and help business owners buy and sell businesses as an investment banker, as a business analyst. And certainly guys in prison can do that too. But many of the people in our courses are just thinking about landscaping or mechanic or construction or restaurant. Math, critical thinking skills, and English will differentiate you from other entry-level employees. And you can rise to your own highest potential, but it won't happen if you don't listen and learn from leaders like Mike. That's what made all the difference in my life, and I am still doing it. That's why I say I never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. It's here Saturday morning. I invited him to participate so I could learn from him and then share what I'm learning with people like our audience. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think it kind of leads me in, and maybe I'm going changing. I think I'm staying on here a little bit, but I'm jumping forward in my career a little bit. But I ended up running a group of surgery centers for a number of years. So I had across locations 100 doctors working in my surgery centers across 3 locations. I had about 75 nurses. I had, or maybe it was like 50 nurses, 25 surgical technicians. And then I had orderlies and front staff people. So we really had the gamut of some of the most educated, experienced, high paid people in the industry, in doctors and surgeons, to people who are really working at minimum wage jobs on a daily basis. So it's a nice place where you can kind of see, there's a common good. You're taking care of people, and not just the people having surgery, but the family members there. But the value that I am taking away from that is the doctors come in and out and do their job, and they're surgeons, and that's what they get paid for. But the people that the patients remember, and the people that the family members of the patient remember, is the person who put the patient in the wheelchair and took them to their car in the day, the person who checked them in. These are my lowest level paid employees, and they made the biggest impact from a perception standpoint on these people. So there was a part of that, and then the critical thinking component is I have orderlies their whole job was, keeping the place running. Cleaning rooms, and the faster they worked and the more efficient they were, the more surgery to take care of. It's like, it was better for the business, but they had to be competent at what they did. They had to be consistent. If they work, the place could fall apart in a day because we're sure if I didn't show up for work, they can deal a day or two without me there. But so the people who could start making the biggest, could I think often make the biggest difference. Unless you're in the business, you don't see it, but they had such a positive impact. And the attitude that those people brought to work every day, they were priceless. And, these were people that I could have replaced and kept paying, get somebody else and paying the bottom to day long. They were so valuable that, year in and year out, these people were getting pay raises and working harder and coming up with, I think we could use less of this or more of that. And they're making decisions because they're working in the rooms and realizing we could save a little money on this supply, or what if we did this a little differently? And you realize the value they added just by their working hard and taking a positive attitude. And, and I think I'd be stupid as somebody running that organization not to listen to the person doing some of the hardest work there. Those are the people where if you're going to try to be successful as you raise up the ranks, you better listen to everybody who's working within the ranks. And they offered some of the best input and drove some really great performance in our business. Not that they did it for any economic gain. They did it because it just made more sense to them. They're working. And I'm telling you, all those people continue to go on and have success. And I know they ended up, some of them going to other places and getting pay raises and getting appreciation and getting nice bonuses. But it's because they worked hard, they took pride in what they were doing, and they thought about what they were doing while they were doing their jobs. So I can think about my critical thinking, and that was one of the big things, is just shut up and listen a little bit. There's a big value in just hearing what everyone else is doing. In my first 6 months in that world, I skipped my whole investment banking career and got to that point quickly, but I just learned from everybody else. It was a brand new environment to me.
You mentioned not only critical thinking skills there, but the third component that I asked you to elaborate on, and that's communication skills.
Sure.
And communication skills is not only what comes. There's this old saying that said God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Is we've got to listen, and we just heard what Mike said. I've got to listen and learn from people at all levels of society, because we're part of a community and we all have to learn. But if we're sitting inside of a jail or a prison and we want to think about what are the challenges I'm going to face, how am I going to grow, how am I going to bring value, I've got to really develop this skill of listening, and I've got to develop this skill of communicating in a manner that will influence people to open opportunities for us. You said that you skipped an entire career of investment banking before we got into your part of your biz dev career and executive career. Walk us through how your communication skills played into the role of your life as an investment banker. And we can even go back to when you graduated from Wharton and what other educational things you did, how you worked your way into getting, investment banking transactions. This is so interesting to our audience.
Sure. Yeah. So sorry. It just, it struck a chord with me when you brought up the painting. When I came out of college, I did end up going to an investment bank called Donaldson, Lufkin and Jenrette. It does not exist anymore. It was acquired 20 plus years ago. But it was known to be one of the, if you came in as a first year person out of college as an analyst there, you knew that was one of the places in the famous or infamous Wall Street where you're going to work harder than everywhere else. And we worked hard. And I was not in our New York office. I was based in Dallas, Texas, actually. But I did work 80 plus hours a week for 2 years. And so the work and the stress load was tremendous, but the experience was incredible. I worked with some of the smartest people in my company and who've been in there and seen a million things. But I got to work with so many other companies that I was either working on financial capital raising, so taking companies public in equity, or raising debt. I worked on mergers and acquisitions. So in doing so, I would be in tremendous number of meetings with chief executive officers, chief financial officers, the senior leadership of these companies. As a 22-year-old kid, I don't know how much, that exposure is kind of like your brain explodes a couple of times of how many smart people around who are learning about their businesses and realizing that I could be working on, I worked on a company that's an air freight company to a major technology company to poultry farms. And these businesses couldn't seem any more dissimilar to one another, but you actually start realizing that it's just a business, and it's just the product might be different. The way they sell it may be, the value proposition is probably totally different, but you still have building block fundamentals in terms of what you can take away from it, and how people think about their business in one industry might seem unique in another. But I've learned now in my career that other knowledge, you can bring it to you can bring something you've learned in one place and bring it somewhere else, and without maybe even realizing out front, you add a tremendous amount of value. Just you've added a different perspective. And I think that it's people's life experiences, whether professionally or personally, can add tremendous value to a given situation. So if you're constantly listening and learning, sort of seize the moment when you see it in the future of, you don't want to always bring a new idea to the table. It's not always a great thing. You kind of find your places, but sometimes you just see something that, and other people are like, wow, hadn't thought about that. And you didn't even realize you were saying anything special just because you had a different experience. So everybody can bring value to a conversation just because they've come down a different path. So investment banking taught me that over and over again, is what you learn from one person. And sometimes what you learn is like, they made bad decisions. Like, that was a horrible decision. You should never have bought that company. You shouldn't be going public. You're actually not competent in your job. You learn those things as well. But they're all takeaways and sort of things to sort of putting them away in the back of your head. They're building blocks. And so I went through a couple of years in that job, and then I decided that I'd been to Wharton, so I'd gotten this great finance training. I'd been in investment banking. You can't do more finance work than I was doing in 2 years. Yet I still realized my accounting knowledge wasn't as good as it should be, or wasn't as strong as it should be if I wanted to be a chief financial officer of a company, which was in the back of my head, still the next game plan for me. So I decided I was going to go back to business school and still take more finance classes, which to somebody who's hearing my story sounds like, why would you even need more? But more accounting classes, which probably sounds terrible to most people, and even to people I know, like, really, why? But I knew that I understood finance. Again, I understood finance at this level. I wanted to understand it at this level, and so I did. I went to the University of Chicago for business school, a very finance and accounting oriented business school, a great school, but I did exactly that. I took a ton of accounting classes. I took a finance classes, and I loved the experience because I knew that each thing I was taking wasn't because somebody told me that I needed to take it. It was, I knew that they were important pieces for me in where I was trying to go. And I had enough experience at that point to know that these were important building blocks for me. And so I got them. I think I sucked the most I could out of those 2 years. Having gotten married right before that too. So it was a nice, I was starting to build my life, but also plan towards my future professionally.
So really enormous takeaways for anybody that's sitting inside of a jail or a prison right now. You don't ever think that because you have one credential, you've reached some level of success. Always be willing to invest in yourself to achieve higher credentials, and not for the value of a piece of paper, but rather for the knowledge you're going to create and the way that you're going to be able to leverage that knowledge to open new opportunities. You may get a GED, you may not have opportunities to go to college, but that's not going to stop you from listening and learning to programs like we present at Prison Professors, or that other people might offer inside of your jail or prison. Every week, we get hundreds of letters from people in jails and prisons across America who are really finding value in stories like Michael Raub, but we've got to be able to listen and learn and say, how do I apply what he just shared to my life? I can confirm that if you focus on math, you focus on developing your English and speaking skills and writing skills and communication skills, you are going to develop stronger critical thinking skills that will help you open new opportunities that may or may not have any relationship to what you're doing right now. You graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School and Chicago's Business School, and then went on to build a career in investment banking. How did your career evolve after you had an MBA?
I was somebody who did something which wasn't as common, which is I went back to investment banking. A lot of people use that as I took that knowledge and I go do something else. So I ended up going back to a rare move, which I went back to the same firm in the same industry, but I had a different industry. I had a different focus. I went from Dallas to San Francisco, and instead of working on the kind of transactions I had worked on, I now worked in an entirely different field, which is called restructuring. And that really involved with companies that were should be good companies, but in poor financial condition. So had to do restructurings, bankruptcies, a lot of fights over money there. I wouldn't call it the most fun work, but I would say some of the most challenging things I've ever worked on. And it really, in that regard, I took an unexpected turn is that you're a finance person, but everything you're talking about ends up being really reading. It's almost like legal. It's much more legal than financial because you're now getting into the intricacies of agreements that had impacted these business financially. And is the money owed back to company A or bank B? And so in those 2 years, I don't even know the number of contracts I read, things that I started working on. And then the knowledge I had took a totally different turn. That financial knowledge was necessary, but now I'm learning almost a whole new skill set of really reading a contract at a way that reading a document at a level that it's like every word now matters. And so it was a very new experience. And I feel like since that time, in the rest of my career, like, before I even get an attorney involved in any of my business things, like I end up writing most of my agreements. I read things, I edit them. I won't even call them, I'm like a pretend lawyer at times. So by the time I give something back to my lawyer, it's very quick and change. It ends up saving me a lot of money, but I actually understand what I understand what I'm signing is more than just I'm signing. I think anyone who's ever, you accept the terms of agreement online, or you from buying a phone to buying a car to buying a house, you get these mountain of documents and people just sign away. They don't, because they feel like you don't have any choice, and you don't. But I'm the guy, when I bought my first house, the person's like, I'm like, I need like 3 days to read all these documents. And they're like, you're going to do what? So I wanted to know what I was signing. I'm like, this is a huge deal. I'm buying my first house. It was crazy. And so I wanted to read every word of it. So I do think there's something to be said about, maybe that's maybe a little crazy of me, but that skill, I think, became something that as I moved on subsequently I left the banking world after another couple of years. For historians, I left in the beginning of 2000, and I joined an internet company that was supposed to be one of the next greatest things in the world. Between the time I joined and 3 months later is when the famed the tech market bubble burst. So I joined a company that was supposed to be tremendous. It was, a rocket ship to the moon, and it started being felt like a death plunge. I mean, I was just in the worst space in the world. Everybody started losing their jobs. I ended up joining a company that had 450 employees, and 2 years later, I was the last employee in the company. We were supposed to be worth billions of dollars. Not that I didn't found the company, but instead, we were worth nothing. And it was one of those, like, what did I do? I left investment bank because the opportunity seemed amazing. I also thought my life would be a little bit better because it was hard I started raising a family, and I had to start making decisions that led me there. Like, okay, I like the career trajectory I'm on now, but now I'd like to move to the CFO track, which is where this was leading me. But also, like, I want to be around for my kids. And so the balance all seemed to make sense. It just ended up being the wrong market, the wrong company, the wrong time. But now it's like, okay, great. Now I have 2 kids. I have a wife. I'm shutting down this business, and I'm in a market where nobody can get a job. This is actually frightening. And what am I going to do? And so sort of backed up and started thinking about, all right, this is what I'm good at. This is what I like to do. Who do I know who can help me figure out a path? And so the amount of emails, phone calls, meetings I had with people I went to school with, people I'd worked with, people somebody else knew. I spent the next 6 months just talking to lots of people. And
does that mean that when the market imploded and you went from investment banking to becoming a senior executive for a startup, and then you lost it, did you have to live for a period of time without an income?
Yes.
How long was that?
6 months.
So that's an important data point for people who are in jail or prison. Here's a guy with the most incredible academic pedigree, the best universities in the world, particularly for his sector, which is business, the Wharton School and the University of Chicago. And yet, despite that pedigree and a background of working for really high-end investment banking firms, he had a hard time getting a job. If a guy like that has a hard time getting a job, what am I going to face as a guy who's coming out of jail or prison? I got to think about that today, that this can be a part of my future. How am I going to sow seeds today to minimize that risk or to recalibrate and open the next opportunity? You eventually, I know, rebounded and recovered by going in a different direction. We're coming to the end, but just give us that background of what you did and how you rebounded and became successful again.
Yeah, well, I mean, quickly, I mean, I talked about it before, the surgery centers, and how that came about was a friend of mine from business school, somebody I actually really respected, super smart, but also thought differently. I was like, this is one of the more interesting people I've ever met. I reached out, one of the first people I was living in San Francisco. He was down in Los Angeles, and I said, I want to come down there. I'd love to just talk. And just, I knew he knew people. So, right, it was reaching out to people that I knew, somebody who understood me, maybe what I could do, and certainly would know other people. So we met, had lunch, nothing, didn't know anything at that time. 3 months later, though, the phone rang, and he called me up and said, hey, would you be interested in working in healthcare? And I said, no interest. Don't want to be in healthcare. Said, really? I'm like, yeah. And he said, well, but it's my brother, and he's got these surgery centers, and I think you should meet him. I said, oh, it's your brother? Well, can I talk to him now? And so I was on a plane the next morning, came down, and before I knew it, I was in healthcare and working and running surgery centers. So it was, again, using somebody, trusting somebody. I'd reached out, right? You had to take the initiative. Like, nobody's like people are busy in their own world. No one's feeling bad for you. You took the initiative, 100 people down. And 3 months later, it turned into an opportunity that now, a short 20 years later, I'm in some respects a healthcare expert. I guess in many respects a healthcare expert. So surgery centers led me into 6 years of building and running and learning that business. I never planned to be an operator. I was always a finance guy, and here I'm running these businesses. But then I jumped.
How big were those businesses in annual revenues?
What do we do in annual revenue? Closing on $15-20 million.
So going from a career where you're simply putting deals together, and what he says about operations is really understanding, how many notepads do I have to buy, and every aspect of how are leads going to come in? How are we going to close deals? How are we going to market? How are we going to employ people? What structures are in place? There's so much to learn, but the reality is it's that same concept of building blocks, math, English, critical thinking skills. This is why we emphasize if you're in jail or prison, learn those skills and open new opportunities. You are going to continue.
Yeah, I'd say, the thing is, like, it's overwhelming, right? If you think about that transition, I don't care what your experience, your education is. Like, I mean, the day I've walked into any new job, I feel sweat going up my back. Like I'm nervous. Like you should be, right? It's a new place. You want to prove that you're going to do a good job. And so I thankfully had the ability to just try to learn as much from people. And it was more like, let me learn and you tell me how I can help, as opposed to me. I'm technically running these couple of surgery centers at first, but I realized I can't run anything because I don't know the business. So how can I be helpful while learning? And that's what I did. Like, somebody was having a problem, something like, oh, I can build a spreadsheet that'll address that problem for you, right? And let me build it, or let me help clean up these files for you. Like, literally, show me how you do your job and what's not working well. And so, as a non-clinician guy, I'm wearing surgical scrubs day in and day out for the first 3 months, and like sitting there working with orderlies and how they're preparing. Prepping an operating room, like what's efficient, what's not efficient. Just watch and learn, and listen to what they're saying, right? Because if they're complaining, there's probably something to learn there, or where there's wastage. So a lot of learning there. So I spent those years in that business, and then we ultimately sold the company, and I stayed on for another year or so. And then I had an opportunity to go join a company called US HealthWorks, which is employer health and other things. We were a big company and they wanted to do acquisitions. And it sort of brought back together my investment banking experience and now this healthcare knowledge that I have. And so I got to go back and doing acquisitions now in a company environment. And it really did make it all, it's like my weird path of my business, my career looked weird on paper from a progression. It all made sense now. Like everything came together. I was like, this is exactly what I should be doing. And so I had a really fun 2-year ride there. And then I had a great opportunity to go do something else and build a brand new business. And I got super excited about it. And the quick storyline there is I left, I meeting with these interesting people, and 3 months into it, we decided like, oh, this is a terrible idea. This isn't going to work. Giving away this job where I was really having success. And now again, I'm back at zero.
And so I mean, now tell us, I know you've become really extraordinarily successful, but not only successful in your own career, but in helping other successful people achieve their dreams, whether it's selling their business or something like that. That again requires that foundational knowledge of math, English, and critical thinking skills. You've got to help people understand what can become versus what exists today. Help us understand your current business and what a typical week or month looks like for you of what you're doing.
I'm going to give I'm going to steal 20 more seconds getting to where I'm at today, because after I made this, like, what did I do move? I went back and said, like, wait a minute, what am I good at? What do I like? And I started working with other companies and helping them. At that point, I wasn't doing a lot of like strategic thinking and how to help build their businesses. And then I got another opportunity to join a company called Western Dental and do more acquisitions, because 12 years later, the CEO of my previous company, I left on great terms. I got a phone call back saying, come over and join us here. So I think the importance of, how you leave a job is as important as how you walk into it. And I did everything I could to leave my job in the best possible way and set other people up for success. And I think that is something that might be one of my biggest takeaways in my career, is that I haven't burned a bridge, which is why I can go back to 12 years or 20 years later, and they've helped me find my paths. So I was at that company, Western Dental, and I'm doing a bunch of acquisitions. And I recognized that I kept buying other businesses or helping buy them that were getting terrible advice on their side. And so I went, wait a minute. If I went and worked with those companies, I could give them the advice that they need to really help grow their business. And even if they want to sell it, be in the right position for success and get the right advice at a right price. And so I made that move 5 years ago now. And so now I'm a dental expert, because I've been in the dental space all these years. I work with all these dental groups. We've continued to grow their businesses. There's tremendous opportunities, and all these various aspects of learning, including buying groups like theirs, have taught me how to help them be successful and them get the best results. So it's this culmination of, you could have, if you'd only done, some of it is just the way they present themselves. Like if you presented yourself a little differently, like I would have paid $1 million more for one business I remember buying, but they didn't know that. And it's not my job to tell them. So my job now is to help these companies like understand their value and really get the most out of it. Or we need to wait 6 months because we need to do some things in your business so you get the value you deserve. So I think it's back to, again, the fundamentals, like every dollar in the business matters, but there's some things that you can't, they're qualitative things that you can do that make the business look better, feel better, understanding your business better. It makes it more valuable. And so, it's always to me about, helping these businesses really. What's your story? What drives you? Everyone in these companies might have a mission statement, but what do you really mean? What are you trying to do? Yes, you take care of a patient, but what are you trying? Why are you different? Why are you better than somebody down the street? And if you don't know that, then you got to figure that out, because you might be successful. So if you don't know it, let's actually kind of break it down and talk about it so you understand why you're. And I think that goes back to people too. It's like, if somebody takes pride in their work, they don't have to make $1 million a year. They don't have to make $100,000 a year. They don't have to make $50,000 a year. They can be very successful and very valued And what they're doing today is, am I happy with what I'm doing today? Or do I have somewhere else I want to go? And like, well, how do I get there? Like, never burn a bridge, keep working with people, keep communicating, and learn. Learn. And at some point, before you know it, you won't even realize teaching somebody else. Like, you're just talking, and in the meantime, you're teaching somebody else. And that's when the light goes on for other people. Like, this person actually knows what this person's actually, like you said, going back to your painter example, this person isn't just painting the walls anymore. They're making sure that I don't overbuy paint, or even, and sometimes worse, underbuy paint. They're thinking about the whole process. They're actually a value add. And by the way, they're also somebody that a customer or a client actually likes. They're, somebody else taught me a rule, like, if you're 10 minutes, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. Don't be on time, be early. Right. And when our call was scheduled, I was on early, and so were you. That was even better. We were both on early. And I think that's the truth, is like, don't make people wait for you. Give somebody more than they expect. And if you do that, I think you have a lot more personal pride, and you have a lot more personal success.
There's so many lessons that we've just learned today from Michael. And first of all, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. It's a weekend, and yet you took time to communicate with more than 100,000 people in jails and prisons today, because we want to be the change that we want to see in the world. You can choose how you are going to build your future with simple building blocks. Figure out how to communicate better. When I was in prison and I listened to Mike, I knew that I wanted to practice in ways that would help me develop diction like he speaks, because I would have liked to have communicated with business people. If I spoke like the penitentiary or like the prison, I would have been fine in that environment, but I wanted to transition into an environment where I could create value and create business opportunities. And that meant I had to learn how to talk differently. I needed to learn how to think differently. I needed to develop my vocabulary. I needed to develop my skills. That's what you've got to do. What's the value of businesses that you sell annually, buy or play in the acquisition game, buy and sell? Just help our audience understand that.
I would say with companies I'm working with right now, there's probably, over the next 24 months, there's anywhere from, depending on what deals get done, anywhere from $50 to $50 million of deals that'll get executed. I mean, one client alone could be 200 million. So that depends, but I probably have 50 to 100 of other things I'll be working on over the next 2 years.
And all of that comes because Mike invested in himself. He never gave up. He was persistent. He lived in accordance with those same principles that we're encouraging you to begin sowing those seeds today. Live by those same principles. And if you do that, you are going to be able to build a better outcome for your life. Mike, we're at the end of our program here. Maybe I'm going to leave you the last word that you might want to communicate with our audience.
Well, first of all, Mike, and I'll say thank you very much to you for the opportunity. Because to me, it actually is an opportunity. It's nice to be able to, if sharing a message with anybody is a benefit, then to me, it's a pleasure. It feels, it's something I'd like to, be able to do more of, always. And I think no matter what people's situation are, I think everyone is pulling for, people love success stories. And so I don't care how down somebody is. There's always going to be a champion for that person if they show that they're motivated and dedicated and want to make themselves better. And you're gonna stumble a lot. And when you're out there in the world, you're gonna fall down. But if you don't have, everyone has a ton of resilience in them. And these people, to make it go from where they've come from to get out back into the world and be moving forward, there's resilience that they don't necessarily, people don't necessarily appreciate it in themselves yet, but they will in time, and other people will too. And so you're going to keep getting knocked down, just keep getting back up. And then the right person, the right opportunity, something will happen. Be positive, hang in there. Every day is not going to be a great day. You're going to have some really crappy days. Get through it. And eventually you're going to get what you deserve. You keep working and you keep grinding and you have a goal. Just work, make it happen. Know that, you might take 2 steps forward and 20 steps back. Then just get back and keep taking 2 more steps forward. And Michael, you're a perfect testament to it. I mean, you're an amazing person from what you've done, from what you do for others. And I think, it's nice that I get to tell my story, but I think you're exactly what, you make what you want out of life. And I think you're the epitome of that. And I think everybody that's, gets to see this should appreciate that they have those same opportunities. It's a choice, and it's a drive and a dedication and a commitment.
I was inspired and learned from guys like you. You are the change that I want to see in the world. And thanks so much for being a part of the Prison Professors program. We'll be back with another inspiring guest tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you.